Hello, I'm Susan Feller. I'm the curator for Stories Are Made, Loop by Loop. And in this exhibit, there are multiple artists. This interview is with Meryl Cook from Nova Scotia. Meryl's work is abstract, active, and because of her use of chakra colors, it's empowering. I chose her work because of the abstract work. It's different. And it's also the backstory, which is really all the stories about these artists. She came to rug hooking because of a medical issue, and it's changed her life. It's changed it not only because she's now rug hooking visually, telling that story, but she's written some books and she's a motivational speaker. So I'd love to welcome Meryl and hear your story.
Thanks so much, Susan. It's always great to chat with you. So thank you for inviting me on this. And I'm so pleased to be part of the exhibit Stories Are Made Loop by Loop. It's just so exciting to be part of that amazing group of artists. So I'm an artist and I work in fiber, and my primary mode is rug hooking, but I'm also a spinner and a wet felter, and I'm learning to watercolor. And I've also recently taken up some weaving. So we'll see where that takes me. I've always been a maker, but about 9 years ago, I gave up my practice as a homeopath, and I used my journaling and my writing as a way to, and my hooking as a way to hold space for myself while I figured out what I was going to do with my life going forward. I've become best known for my use of chakra colors and my series of Wild Women mats. I've hooked about 11 or 12 Wild Women mats in the past 7 or 8 years. So I thought that I would use my Wild Women as an illustration of how my work is evolving. So I'll just share my screen here. Tells me it's coming up. Okay. So this is just my title page.
It's not on full
This is my,
screen.
sorry?
It's not on full screen yet.
Okay, let me,
Enter, yeah,
how's that?
get almost there. We still
Okay.
have your multiples down the side.
Okay. That's better, isn't it? There we
That's
go.
better.
Okay.
We do have the
Excellent.
slide that we have your individual slides at the bottom also still, so it's not full screen.
Okay, I've got, oh, I see. Um,
Try that
I
green
don't,
button again, up or left.
I don't have a green button on this
Oh,
screen now. Wait,
okay.
maybe I go to, I'm working on two screens and I'm just learning how to do that. But yeah, I don't have a green button. So
Okay.
we'll just go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
it's visible.
All right, excellent. All right. So again, I'm happy to have this conversation with you today, Susan. So this is the first of my Wild Women, and she's called Wild Woman Sisterhood. She's quite a tall, long piece. She's about 35 inches long, and she's a very simple figure, you can see. And in this one, I had the chakra colors on the outsides in those circles. And there's very little detail on the woman. And she's also hooked with more wool fabric. And as many of you know who are, if you're a rug hooker, you know that wool is getting harder and harder to find, wool fabric. So you'll see my work evolves a little bit away from too many of the wool strips. In this rug, I had never hooked with the color yellow before, and yellow in the chakra colors represents the solar plexus chakra, which is about having courage, being brave, really having an idea of I am who I am. So it's a good sense of self. And there was also a quote from my journal that I wrote on the back of the mat when it was hemmed. And I don't bind with rug tape, and that's so that the quotes from my journal can be shown. And this was about wild woman standing tall, the earth is powerful, um, I don't have the quote in front of me to read you the whole thing, but basically it was about this finding this sisterhood. The next one I wanted to show you is called Wild Woman in Willow Tree Pose, and she's actually one of my favorites in my Wild Woman series. And in this piece, this was the first time I had done a pixelation technique. I learned it at Solder Village from some of the rugs that I saw there in 2018. And so I pixelated the chakra colors all throughout her hair, as well as being in her body. I used a white background with lots of textures, and the textures are actually raised to show movement. So when you look very closely at this rug, you can see that the movement echoes her shape in the textures. And again, I used a quote from my journal about learning to bend and not break when life throws you difficulties and challenges, or when the wind blows like a willow tree. The next rug I want to talk about was Wild Woman Writes Dear Universe. And this was my first wild woman to incorporate wet felting. So she has her letter there where she's written Dear Universe is wet felted, and it's also some very rudimentary embroidery that I tried on it. And the other thing that I did differently in this piece is that instead of having all of the 8 chakra colors being represented in the woman, I actually spun yarn for the background that included all of the 8 colors, so that they're all interspersed within the purple yarns. And that was purple for the crown chakra, was the representation of this piece. And at that time, I had been writing, and I still am, writing letters to the universe saying, Dear universe, please send invitations, or please send this. And so it was just my way of sort of putting out energy into the world that I wanted to have come into my life. The next rug is one I'm really, really excited and happy about. And it's quite a large rug. I should have brought the dimensions with me, but it's about 40 inches long. And it's called Wild Woman is Feeling Inspired, and it's the most ground that I've had in any of my Wild Woman designs. You may have noticed some of the previous designs, she's kind of floating in the air. There's not much ground below her, and here she's rooted and she's really on the ground. And the whole rug is about being rooted and yet connected to the heavens. So I've used the tree branches as kind of a symbol of being connected to the heavens. And there's a lot of my hand spun yarns in this piece. In particular, the tree bark is her dress is all hand spun yarns. And this piece also is the second piece that combines rug hooking and wet felting. So her face and her hands and her feet are made of wet felted yarn fabrics. And what I do is I sew it onto the linen, stuff it with a little bit of fleece, and then hook around it. So that's how I've done that. And then the next piece I wanted to tell you about was Wild Woman Spreads Her Wings. And I want to just show you how I made this one as opposed to the final product. So the first thing I did was I felted some fabrics, and you can see on the top left, I felted the fabrics and made them into sort of a hat and her headdress instead of hair. And also this one has a lot of ground as well. The pink felted fabric at the bottom is all felted, and that represents the ground. And I think that this says something about me, that the last 2 rugs I've had a lot more ground. And I think it's that I'm really finding my groove as an artist and as a woman in midlife, and having more ground really represents that. And also her arms, instead of arms, I gave her wings, and I used a seafoam background with more even heights of loops because I wanted the figure of the woman to really stand out. So I've sort of moved away from the highly sculptural look of some of my earlier wild women. Yeah. So that's her. I have since finished her, and she's also another large piece. So that's I think the other thing is my wild women are getting bigger. They all were kind of a standard size after the first one for 6 or 7 of them, but now they seem to be getting bigger. And the latest one that I have in progress, I don't have anything to show you yet because she's still just on my sketchbook and not on the linen, is Wild Woman Dreaming, and it's based on the Rumi quote about out beyond there is a field and I will meet you there. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful quote. So it's a woman lying down in a field of flowers. So I'm really excited. And so basically the ground is most of most of the picture in that case. So I think that the Wild Women tell my story. Starting with the Wild Woman Sisterhood, I was looking for my tribe after I had written my first book and had just recovered from breast cancer and was kind of finding my way. All of them involve sort of how I've been thinking and writing about how to move forward through my life's challenges. Then they're about trusting the universe with Dear Universe, and also learning to ground, but also to be connected to the astral realm and taking off from a firm foundation. So that's really my journey as a midlife woman, and it's been reflected in these mats. And I think that they also speak to women and other people who are looking to tap into their own inner wild selves. So, I mean, I make them for myself, but I also make them knowing that they will resonate with others. And in a way, they resonate with others who also resonate with me. So it is, again, a little bit about finding my tribe. And as I evolve, as I mentioned briefly earlier, I'm using less and less fabric strips, mainly because of availability, because I do like to use recycled fabrics where possible. I do occasionally dye and use new wool, but in general, I try to stay away from that. And still, my process begins with my journal. Always, every design that I do begins with my journaling. I write, I feel inspired by the phrases, and then I sketch my design ideas, and then that becomes the design. And I think what has continued as well is that my designs tend to have one central figure. Even my abstract designs have one central figure in general. And in this way, they're quite simple. And I think the last thing is my use of many textures. So for example, when I'm doing one color, I always choose at least five fibers that are either different in tone or color or texture or all of those things. Partly because I love variety, but also I think that it gives a piece more depth when there's less uniformity of fiber. And yeah, so I think that those things, the textures, and when I vary my heights, it also gives my work depth and more interest. So that's about all I had to say about my development as an artist, but I'm just so pleased to be here to be able to talk to you about this.
Let's stop sharing screen, and I have a couple other points I want to emphasize from
Hey,
hearing
sure.
your talk. Um,
Mhm.
the questions that I come up with hopefully encourage people to review it again, either with a particular question in mind so that they pick up that point, or just to look at your work in a different way.
Mm.
So one of the points that I think is really, really important for all of us is that you're experimenting in a variety of different techniques.
Mhm.
Can you share with us how that affects, since we're doing rug hooking so much, how, working with the felt or even going into watercolor, all of these are new to you, so they're new
Mhm.
experiences, but how those experiences come back to your loop pulling, which is actually the easiest part of it.
Yes, the loop pulling is the easiest. I think that having all the different techniques at my disposal really keeps me interested and alive about my hooking, but also I guess I just like variety as well. And I think once you're a fiber artist, you're a fiber artist. And so rug hookers, we are fiber artists, but we love all things fiber. So it's wonderful. And usually most of the things that I add in, I've played with for a bit before I add them to my rug hooking pieces. So I played with the wet felting for a couple of years actually before I started adding them to my pieces. And I think it's because I'm always a hooker. Like it's always going to be my primary medium. And so even when I'm wet felting and I made this necklace and things like that, but I really when I daydream and when I think and I write, I'm thinking about how would that look on a piece, So everything I'm learning, I feel like it feeds into my passion for rug hooking, I would say. And some of the things, came about out of necessity. So with the spinning, I was spending a fortune on yarns because I really love those nice bumpy yarns, and they don't go a long way, a skein of a bumpy yarn. And so I thought, well, maybe I could learn to do that. And so that's kind of how I evolved into a spinner. And I also wanted more control over what kinds of textures I had in my rugs and and what I could add to them. And now I'm actually trying to make thinner yarns and actually bind them together. I forget what that's called, where you rotate
Why?
them together. Yes, apply them. That's it. See, I'm just new at that, and so I'm doing that because I'm wanting some more contrast to some of my bumpy yarns.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the other part that I really saw, and I appreciate the progress in your slides, is that
Mm.
over time, so not instantly,
Mhm.
you are finding yourself and finding a new
Mhm.
self and then exploring what that is, and that the designs happen, and then you're able to go back, and you did a nice overview for us
Mm.
and went step by step. But I don't think, and I'm asking, when you began with that first piece, did you imagine that you would be, able to lift up and fly off
No,
on a years
absolutely.
later?
No, no. I mean,
Hmm.
I didn't actually start with the idea of creating a series, and it was only when after I'd done a few of them and realized there was kind of an evolution there, and that they were telling my story. Because I think originally my first 7 original healing mats, which are part of my first book, were about my steps for healing, and
Mhm.
then at a certain point when I felt like, okay, I've recovered now. Then it was about what do I want to be? And I think that's one of the bounties, one of the gifts of being a woman in midlife is we get a chance to kind of redefine ourselves,
Yeah.
and regardless of whether you have a health crisis or anything, because our lives change at in our 50s and up, and so it's now my wild women are about what do I want to be now, and what about next, and that kind of thing. So yeah,
Yeah, and I
I
think
don't.
that's a really good point for anyone. I did a year study when I was 59 going on
Mm.
60 for exactly that same
Yeah,
reason, just finally saying, wait, let me slow down, stop,
yeah.
and not have any parameters as to what I'm exploring, but just do that over the year. And that has carried me into an entire new decade.
That was a huge time of blossoming for you. I remember that, and the things that you produced, and they've really informed what you're doing going forward.
They have, not just visually, or
Right.
finding different techniques like going back to embroidery and
Yeah.
continuing to have the freedom to explore techniques that I had avoided for many, many years. Um,
Yeah.
just because it's fun. And
Yeah.
then, as you said, when you feel more proficient with one, or you suddenly say, this is going to work on
Uh-huh.
piece. That's
Yeah.
the best part. I want to
Yeah.
share with you that when I do gallery talks with the exhibit in the different venues, and it's
Mhm.
now at the Clay Center, your piece, the texture of your pieces is something that everyone really resonates with. And I
Mm.
think they're very inquisitive about, it's not flat. loops, you
Mhm.
know, nice and all beautifully lined up as Terry Todd's are, which is just
Yeah.
absolutely gorgeous, her directional
Mhm.
hooking. In yours, they're exploring what those yarns are doing and how, as you said, how you're intermixing the different shades and values. The pieces that are behind you are
Mhm.
great examples of all that
Mhm.
energy, as I
Yeah.
described your piece in the beginning. So I
Yeah.
want to compliment you that your work is really drawing people to look very, very closely.
That is so exciting. When I saw one of the photographs from the recent open house of people looking up closely at my breaking open, that was so exciting. I wish I could have been there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's why these interviews are sharing to everyone who isn't able to see the exhibits,
Mm.
some conversations with all of you because I am your voices at these
Mhm.
venues. But
Oh,
your
that's so
artwork
nice.
is speaking very loudly, and we
Thank you.
really do appreciate it. So I think the one lesson that your work can share to others is to explore.
To explore, and I think, you know what, it's my whole personality as well, is sort of my one loop at a time philosophy, that you don't have to have it all figured out. You know, you can just try things, and if you don't like them, try something else. And you don't need to know where you're going, and necessarily with, like, for example, my wet felting has evolved from just doing hands to now I'm doing hats and all kinds of other things on pieces. And it just starts with just trying something and seeing if you like it and seeing if it's fun.
And not holding yourself back by making all the plans first.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I recently read your workbook, went through it,
Oh,
and also your book. And my feeling for all of it is a positiveness in thought, and
mhm.
greatly appreciate that. I think
Mm.
that was the lesson that I took from it, and I will be
Oh,
trying
lovely.
to be very positive in all of my thoughts as I put them out. So
Yeah, I
thank
think that you definitely can't discount negative thoughts and
Mhm.
negative feelings. You know, they have to be expressed. I think if we just ignore them, they just fester and they come back to bite us. But I think that the energy we put out there is what we attract, is what I believe. And so if I want to attract really fabulous, fun stuff into my life, then I need to project that kind of energy. And I need to, in my journal, I write just a little bit about something negative, and then I flip it and say, what could I write about? You know, what would it feel like if this situation were reversed, if
Mhm.
this was something different, and how would that feel? And how would my body feel? Yeah,
And
so I'm glad.
that's good goals. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can't say I always have positive thoughts, but that's where I work at it, and you work at it a little bit at a time, right? And just yeah, you don't have to be perfect at it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we will make
Ah,
sure that your contact information is the last slide in this interview. And I encourage
right.
everyone to follow you, especially on Instagram. Your
Mhm.
stories are very step by step and certainly empowering. So thank you again.
Ah. Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much, Susan.